For today's commentary, the main topic will be karma. We'll talk about other areas of interest as well. At the beginning of each commentary, I ask you to perceive a divine quality within me. And the reason is, by seeing that divine quality in me, it'll remind you that you possess that same divine quality within yourself. Today, the divine quality I ask you to see in me is harmlessness, the virtue that cannot conceive of attack. The part of the course that we'll focus on today is Chapter 5, Section 5, The Ego's Use of Guilt, paragraphs 3 through 6. Paragraph 3. What is the ego's goal? The ego wants the autonomy of a separate identity. Quote, the ego always attacks on behalf of separation. Believing it has the power to do this, it does nothing else, because its goal is autonomy and nothing else. The ego is the part of the mind that believes in what? The ego is the part of the mind that believes in division or separation. Can part of God detach itself without believing it is attacking him? No. God is oneness, so separating from him appears to be an attack on his oneness. Eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge is a symbolic expression of usurping the ability for what? It's usurping or stealing the power for self-creating. This is the only sense in which God and his creations are not co-creators. The idea that we're self-creating is an insane idea. That last part of that quote, this is the only sense in which God and his creations are not co-creators. That sentence refers to the fact that in heaven, we create with God and we make our own creations. However, only God, only in this one sense, are we not co-creators with God. Only God is the first cause. So God created us, and so God didn't need a co-creator to create us. He created us all by himself, and that's why he's the first cause. And we can never be the first cause. But the idea of self-creating, when we accept that idea that we can make ourselves into whatever we want to be, it's usurping or taking the power of God as the first cause and assigning that ability to ourselves, which is an insane idea, because when we think apart from God, we're thinking insanely. Next question. You can perceive yourself as self-creating, but you cannot do more than what? You cannot do more than believe it. You cannot make it true. What two things does the ego believe about you? The ego believes that you usurp the power of God, and the ego believes that it is you. Why is the ego insane? The ego teaches you that you can see yourself as separate from your meaning only by experiencing yourself as unreal. This means the ego teaches you that you are not what you are as God created you. And that's why the ego is insane. Because again, whenever we think in opposition to God, we're thinking insanely. And in this case, the ego is telling us that we are not what we are. If I said I was Napoleon, you would think, this guy must be insane. He doesn't know who he is. And that's the ego. He's always telling us something that we're not. Next question. If you identify with the ego, you must perceive yourself as what? If you identify with the ego, you must perceive yourself as guilty. Whenever you respond to your ego, you will experience what? Whenever you respond to your ego, you will experience guilt and you will fear punishment. The ego is quite literally what? The ego is quite literally a fearful thought. If you believe the ego telling you that you attack God, you will experience what? You will experience guilt and fear of punishment from God. Quote, the severity of the guilt is so acute that it must be projected. You know, when we think we feel guilty about things in this world, various things that happen to us, various things in our childhood, or even recent history, all that guilt goes back to the original separation, the original appearance of guilt. The imagined usurping of functions not your own is the basis of what? The imagined usurping the functions of your own that are not your own is the basis for fear. Quote, the whole world you see reflects the illusion that you have attacked God and usurped his power, making fear inevitable. How will you be absolved of guilt and escape from fear? By following the Holy Spirit's guidance and by fully accepting the atonement that will correct all your errors. And this is the core of the curriculum of the course. Paragraph 4. What you accept into your mind has what for you? Quote, whatever you accept into your mind has reality for you. It is your acceptance of it that makes it real, or at least makes it seem real to you. What is the best example of something that appears real to you because your mind has accepted it? The best example is the ego. Quote, if you enthrone the ego in your mind, your allowing it to enter makes it your reality. The power of the mind to make the ego seem real is possible for what reason? because the mind is capable of creating reality or making illusions. You'll notice in the Course that the word create and creating refer to extending love in heaven, and that extending love in heaven enables the creating of new creations in heaven. However, when the Course uses the word make, it's talking about what the ego does. It makes illusions here in the dream world of perceptions. You must learn to think in what way? You must learn to think with God. To think with Him is to think like Him. What part of your mind enables you to think with God? The part of your mind that enables you to think with God is your right mind, which is a reflection of God's truth and love. And God is in your right mind, although He's represented by the Holy Spirit. Because God doesn't have perception, and He created the Holy Spirit with both knowledge and perception, so the Holy Spirit could communicate with both God and with those of us that are in this dream world of perception. What you have done to hurt your mind has made it so unnatural that it does not remember what? Your unnatural mind does not remember what is natural to it. And when you are told what is natural, you cannot understand it. What is an example of what is natural to your mind that you cannot understand? Quote, the recognition of the part as whole and of the whole in every part is perfectly natural, for it is the way God thinks, and what is natural to Him is natural to you. What does the ego tell you about the relationship between the part and the whole? Ego-based perception tells you that a part cannot be the whole. For example, a part of a car, like a steering wheel, can't be the whole car. Within the total awareness of knowledge in heaven, what is the difference between the part and the whole? Within knowledge, quote, there is no difference between the part and the whole. Why is the recognition of the part as whole and of the whole in every part very important to your understanding? This recognition of the part as the whole and the whole in every part is important to your understanding because your identity in heaven consists of simultaneously being a part and being whole. And the way that is explained is that you are a part of the sonship. So that's the partness aspect of your identity. The other part of your identity, the other aspect of your identity, is your wholeness identity. And so your wholeness identity consists of the fact that you are the one Son of God the one Christ, the one self, shared by all parts of the Sonship equally. Now, the Course does an interesting thing. It takes an idea from the West, and it takes an idea from the East, and those two ideas seem to contradict each other, and yet the Course puts those two ideas together and says they don't contradict each other at all. The Western idea is that your identity consists of having an individual spirit called your soul, and this individual identity or soul goes with you to heaven, and it's your identity in heaven as an individual, and as an individual that's apart from God. The Eastern idea is that you have a shared identity, a shared self, and the self I'm referring to is with a capital S, a shared self. In the East, it's called the Atman, or the Purusha. And when you give up your ego, according to Eastern philosophy, you lose all individuality. The idea of an individual soul doesn't fit in with this concept in Eastern philosophy. And you become the Atman, or the Purusha, or the Self, with a capital S, a shared identity. And so what the Course does is it takes these two ideas, the idea of an individual identity of a soul and a shared identity as the one self shared by everyone who awakens, puts them together and says the part is the whole. The individual partness and the wholeness are one identity, two aspects of one identity. You have one identity in heaven, but that identity in heaven, according to the Course, has two aspects. It has an individual aspect as one individual part of the Sonship, and it has a wholeness aspect in that every individual part of the Sonship shares the same one self, the one Christ, the one Son of God. And so that's why this idea of the part and the whole in heaven being the same, so there's no difference between the part and the whole, makes perfect sense. And this idea of having two aspects to one identity is important because when we fell asleep in heaven, we separated these two aspects of our identity in heaven. And we exaggerated and distorted our partness as an individual part of the Sonship, and we made that into the ego, an exaggerated version of separation, putting individuality in the category of separation. Our individuality in heaven was as part of the Sonship, in which there was no separation between the parts of the Sonship. But in this world of dreams, your exaggerated individuality has become the ego. However, the other aspect of your divine identity in heaven, the self, the shared self that's shared by all parts of the Sonship, that aspect didn't fall asleep. Only your partners fell asleep. when you wake up in heaven, you'll get rid of the ego, but you'll still have a divine individuality. You'll be able to accept your role as an individual part of the sonship, and you'll recognize your shared identity as the self, the one Christ, the one Son of God. So that's why this idea of partness and wholeness is important. Even though it's not understandable very well within perception, it's perfectly natural to your awareness in heaven. Next question. What is a sure sign that your thinking is unnatural? A sure sign that your thinking is unnatural is when you have thoughts of your own guilt, or when you perceive guilt in others. Thoughts of guilt lead to what? Thoughts of guilt lead to the false belief in sin, which causes guilt and deserves punishment, not love. When the ego sees sins that cannot be corrected, the Holy Spirit sees what? Quote, mistakes he, meaning the Holy Spirit, recognizes and would correct them all as God entrusted him to do. But sin he knows not, nor can he recognize mistakes that cannot be corrected. The Course tells us that sins are mistakes that cannot be corrected, but the Holy Spirit sees only mistakes. Question. To the Holy Spirit, mistakes are for what? Quote, for a mistake that cannot be corrected is meaningless to him, meaningless to the Holy Spirit. Mistakes are for correction. Mistakes call for what? Mistakes call for correction because they are calls for love. How does the ego perceive sin? The ego does not perceive sin as a lack of love, but as a positive act of assault. Why does the ego perceive sin as an attack rather than as a lack of love? Quote, this is necessary to the ego's survival, because as soon as you regard sin as a lack, you will automatically attempt to remedy the situation by supplying the love that was lacking. The ego is the part of the mind that believes in what? The ego is the part of the mind that believes in division, meaning the belief in separation and attack. The ego's survival depends on what? The ego's survival depends on your belief in it. And so the ego needs you to believe in the value of separation, attack, and division, which supports your belief in the ego itself. What is the mission Jesus has given you? Quote, your mission is very simple. You are asked to live so as to demonstrate that you are not in ego, and I, meaning Jesus, Do not choose God's channels wrongly. You know, it's easy to talk about the theories of the Course. The difficult aspect of it is the application. Can you show your brother that you're not an ego? Even if your brother is reacting to you as an ego, can you still show your brother that you're not an ego? And Jesus says, that's your mission. And Jesus is confident that you can accomplish it. Paragraph 5. The body is healed as a result of what? Being sane, the mind heals the body because it has been healed. In other words, a healed mind produces a healed body. The sane mind cannot conceive of what? This quote, the sane mind cannot conceive of illness because it cannot conceive of attacking anyone or anything. The sane mind possesses harmlessness and so brings health to the mind and body. So there's the idea of harmlessness. A sane mind is harmless. You know, harmlessness is considered a very important virtue in Eastern philosophy. It's called ahimsa. And it means that every person or every living being has the divine spark within them. And because of that, if you harm any living thing, you are attacking yourself. Because everything that's divine is part of the same oneness, just as you are. What is the relationship between health and the awareness of inner peace? Quote, peace is an attribute in you. You cannot find it outside. Illness is a form of external searching. Health is inner peace. When it says illness is some form of external searching, it means you're searching for peace of mind outside and you're failing to find the peace that's within you, which is the peace of God. And finding that inner peace is restoring your health. Your health is the result of your desire to see your brother in what way? Your health is a desire to see your brother with no blood upon his hands, nor guilt upon his heart made heavy with the proof of sin. This means your health is determined by seeing your brother as the guiltless Son of God that he is and that you are. The body will be healthy if you maintain in the mind what one purpose for the body. The body will be healthy if you maintain in the mind the purpose of being only a communication device and assign to the body no other purpose, never assigning attack to the body. What will heal your brothers and heal you? What will heal your brothers and heal you is using your body only to reach your brothers so the Holy Spirit can teach His message through you. So the body being a communication device enables the Holy Spirit to let His voice speak through you to help your brothers and sisters awaken. If you accept only the purpose, interpretation, and functions given to your mind and body by the Holy Spirit, you cannot become what? If you completely listen to the Holy Spirit and follow the Holy Spirit's guidance, you cannot become sick. Health is the result of relinquishing all attempts to use the body in what way? Quote, health is the result of relinquishing all attempts to use the body lovelessly. In other words, the absence of love invites sickness. Paragraph 6. The ego can interpret the laws of God according to what? According to what it wants and what it wants to believe is true. What question must you ask, and actually do ask, every minute and every second? The question is that you ask yourself all the time is, what do you want? In other words, what do you desire? Each moment of decision is a judgment of what you want. And this judgment of your desire produces what? Your judgments of what you want and judgments of your desires produce effects. Your judgment of deciding what you want will automatically produce continuing effects until what happens? Until the effects of your judgment of what you want, until that judgment changes, those effects will continue. But if you change your judgment, then the effects will not continue, or there will be new effects based on your new decision of what you want. What is the question that you must ask in connection with everything? Quote, what for? What is the purpose? Whatever it is, it will direct your efforts automatically. How is your purpose related to your decision making? You may be a little confused about the difference between a purpose and a goal. A purpose is your overall reason behind your decision making. So your purpose can affect many decisions. And this purpose can have many specific goals, but the overall reason behind it is what the purpose is. And an important purpose that you might want to consider choosing is the purpose of following the Holy Spirit. The other option is to follow the ego. You have the purpose of following the ego. And your decisions will be affected by your choice of a purpose, such as these two purposes, the purpose of following the Holy Spirit or the purpose of following the ego. How long will your decision of purpose remain in effect? This is a very important idea. Quote, when you make a decision of purpose, you have made a decision about your future effort, a decision that will remain in effect unless you change your mind. So your decisions remain in effect continuously, but you have the option of changing your mind and producing new results in the present moment. What does the Course say about the timing of cause and effect? Cause and effect are a divine law. Quote, cause and effect are one, not separate. In other words, cause and effect happen simultaneously. Are cause and effect always simultaneous at the mental level? Yes. Thinking and its results are really simultaneous, for cause and effect are never separate. When the cause is at the mental level and the effect is at the physical level, are cause and effect immediate? Yes. Mental thoughts produce immediate physical effects on the body, but the effects are not immediately noticeable. For example, if you have a passing guilty thought in your mind that you do not fully accept, that won't have any effect because you haven't accepted it. But if you have a guilty thought in your mind that you accept, that your mind accepts and believes is true, it will have an effect on your body, but it won't be an effect that you notice immediately. For example, your heartbeat or blood pressure may rise just slightly because of this one thought that immediately affects it. But you wouldn't notice that. Next question. Thoughts that are held continuously are the cause of what? So here we're talking about a thought that you've accepted into the mind, but you're holding on to it continuously. And they cause these thoughts cause what? They cause physical behavior, physical action, or physical symptoms, which include space and time factors that cause a delay in time as those actions are being carried out. So, although a mental cause can produce an immediately unnoticeable effect, when effects are noticed, it's because you're holding thoughts in your mind continuously, and therefore they're producing effects that seem to happen over time, and they're only because you're holding thoughts continuously. And as I said, those include physical behavior, physical action, and especially physical symptoms of sickness. What can be the result of holding thoughts of guilt in the mind continuously? Guilty thoughts held continuously in the mind, can have the effect of causing sickness in the body after a time delay. Notice, if you're holding guilty thoughts in your mind, it doesn't mean you're suddenly going to fall down and get sick. But if you persist to hold these thoughts, over time, they can produce physical symptoms. But that's only because you're connecting guilt with the idea of punishment. And you're assigning those symptoms to your body. Mind is basically attacking the body for its own thoughts. How are cause and effect related to attack thoughts? Quote, all attack is self-attack. And the word self there is with a capital S. They're an attack on yourself with a capital S, meaning they're an attack on your true nature as the self, the Christ, the one Son of God. So, the entire quote is, all attack is self-attack. It cannot be anything else. Arising from your own decision not to be what you are, it is an attack on your identification. In other words, all attack is an attack on your awareness of your own true identity. If you attack a brother, even by attacking him by projecting guilty thoughts at him, you're attacking your awareness of who you are. It's a self-attack. It blocks your awareness of your divine true nature. Just as it blocks your awareness of your brother's nature, it's an attack on yourself and your own awareness. What is the traditional idea of karma? The traditional idea of karma, emphasized in Eastern philosophy, is that past good deeds will be rewarded in the future, and past bad deeds will cause a karmic debt or punishment that must be experienced in the future. Is karma a divine law of God? No. The traditional idea of karma is not a divine law. Now, Eastern philosophy considers this to be a divine law, but according to the Course, it is not a divine law. Now, the Course actually never mentions the word karma, so in order to find that word, you have to go back to Helen Schucman's original notes, the handwritten notes. And some of those notes were not included in the published version, the most commonly read public version of the Course. Helen Schucman's handwritten notes say what about karmic retribution? Her notes say, quote, God does not believe in karmic retribution at all. What do Helen Schucman's notes say about the danger of karmic theories? Here's what it says. Karmic theories, quote, recognize that the mind is the builder, but do not realize that it is only what is building now that really generates the future. The past in itself does not have the ability to do this. So I'm going to use an analogy to explain this idea. Use your imagination. Imagine a ship. It's on a navigation trajectory toward London. It originally was parked in New York. When it was in New York, cargo was put on the ship. And the ship, with this cargo on it, is halfway now between New York and London, and the captain discovers that some of the cargo that was loaded in New York has a poison gas coming from it. And the ship's captain orders his crew to put on gas masks and to then take the cargo that's emitting poisonous gas and dump it into the ocean in order to protect all the passengers on the ship currently. Now, in this analogy, New York represents the past. London represents the future. The ship halfway between New York and London represents the present. If you said the ship was carrying New York, that would make no sense. The idea of the ship carrying the past makes no sense. But the cargo that was loaded in New York, especially the cargo that proved to have a poison gas on it, in this analogy, that portion of your cargo are negative thoughts that you carry in your mind from the past. They aren't in the past. You carried them in the present, all the way from New York to halfway to London. So although New York is gone and the past is gone, your carrying of past thoughts are only affecting you. This poisonous gas could affect you only in the present because you're carrying that cargo with you. Symbolically, that poison gas coming from the cargo is like the guilty thoughts that you carry in your mind. Those guilty thoughts are like a poison that affects your mind in the present, even though you're carrying it from the past. It's only the fact that you're carrying it in the present that has any effect on you now. But the good part of this story is that you can dump the poisonous cargo, you can dump guilty memories, not all your memories. You have loving memories you want to keep, but you can dump the part of the cargo, those guilty thoughts that are like a poison to your mind. Because remember, guilt is the idea that you deserve punishment, not love. Next question. What divine law is related to karma? The divine law that's related to karma is God's law of cause and effect happening simultaneously in the present, which can be called present karma. But there is no past karma or future karma. Now, this idea of present karma is just a word that can be used, but the correct idea here is it's really just cause and effect that happens simultaneously in the present. But bad deeds in the past don't automatically produce bad results in the future, because you have the opportunity in the present to change your mind. Just like the poisonous cargo or the guilty thoughts that can be dumped, you don't have to carry them anymore. That ship that was halfway to London, from that halfway point on to London, there's no more poison gas. And so when you dump guilty memories, they don't carry on into the future. They don't continue to produce effects. As we said earlier, holding thoughts in the mind will produce effects. Guilty thoughts held in the mind over a period of time can even produce physical symptoms. But if you dump the guilty thoughts now, they can have no effect on the future. Although karma is not a divine law, you can still experience what you consider to be karmic effects. Because of what? Why can you still experience karmic effects? Well, because of the power of your belief in karma, making it seem real to you. So when Eastern philosophy teaches this idea of karma, all the people who believe this philosophy will believe karma is true, and because they believe it is true, it will become true for them. How do you manifest your subjective belief in karma? The way you manifest your subjective belief in karma is that by making karma into a self-imposed accounting system. That's the best way to describe it. A self-imposed accounting system in which you assign to yourself rewards or punishments determined by what you subjectively feel you deserve. In other words, this is not decided by God. God doesn't decide what punishments you deserve or rewards you deserve. It's a self-imposed accounting system. You decide your own punishments and rewards based on what you feel you deserve. What belief fuels your self-imposed karmic punishment? The belief that fuels your self-imposed karmic punishment is the belief in the illusion of guilt that says you deserve punishment, not love. What practice enables you to free yourself from your self-imposed accounting system that fosters a guilty self-image? So how can you free yourself from this self-imposed accounting system that people call karma, but really it's something you're doing to yourself? How do you free yourself? The answer is forgiveness enables you to change your present thinking, to release guilt, and to accept yourself as the innocent Son of God now. And so the past will not determine your future condition. What is sickness in relation to the self-imposed belief in karma? Sickness is the self-imposed karmic punishment of guilt made manifest. Interesting idea. Sickness is guilt made manifest. Quote, sickness where guilt is absent cannot come for it is but another form of guilt. So sickness is the effect of guilt. The Course clearly states this in many ways. Sickness is caused by guilt, but you can discard guilt and therefore prevent sickness. What does accepting the atonement do in relation to sickness? The atonement takes away the guilt that makes sickness possible, and that is cure indeed. For sickness now is gone, with nothing left to which it can return. And of course, atonement takes away guilt and consists of one of the main practices is forgiveness, which is the release of guilt also. What are the two choices of what you want? The two choices of what you want are the Holy Spirit, meaning the purpose and goals of the Holy Spirit, or you want the purpose and goals of the ego. These are the only two alternatives the mind can accept and obey. Only what God creates is what? Only what God creates is irreversible and unchangeable. What you made can always be what? What you made, and here it's talking about the ego, what the ego made, can always be what? It can always be changed. When you do not think like God, you are not really thinking at all. So you can change what you make or what the ego makes. What are delusional ideas? Delusional ideas are beliefs that are firmly maintained in the mind despite being contradicted by reality or rational argument. Quote, delusional ideas are not real thoughts, although you can believe in them. The function of thought comes from where? The function of thought comes from God and is in God. Your ego gives you the false impression that thinking is what kind of activity? Your ego gives you the false impression that your thinking is an autonomous activity up to you, because the ego itself is the idea that you are alone. Because you are a thought within the mind of God, and when I say thought within the mind of God, the word thought is with a capital T. Because you are a thought within the mind of God, you cannot do what? Quote, as part of his thought, meaning as part of God's thought, you cannot think apart from him. That's because, apart from God, your thoughts are meaningless, insane, and not real thinking. So that's the end of today's commentary, and we will have a 1-minute meditation. At the beginning, I ask you to perceive harmlessness in me as I'm speaking, so that you will recognize and identify harmlessness within yourself. This harmlessness cannot conceive of sickness because it cannot conceive of attack. So I ask you now, we're going to take 1 minute. I ask you to join me in a 1-minute meditation in which we focus on harmlessness, the idea of giving up all belief in any value of attack. So here we go into the silence as we focus for 1 minute on the virtue of harmlessness. Amen.